The Rules of Golf is produced and broadcast by the Zeus Radio Network for thegolfdirector.com. I'm Martin Woodhouse, and today we want to continue on with that little group of rules we were discussing last week, 23, 24, 25. We looked at loose impediments last week, these are things that we get relief from on the golf course we don't need to deal with. So we looked at 23 last week. We'll get into 24 today. But I was just talking to Jeff before the show, and he said we had a little bit of activity on the forum. A couple of interesting questions came up.
That's my mic. There it is. Sorry about that. We got some couple questions come through from our forum on the TGD community about the rules of golf, and one of them, we'll just go ahead and get to that one first, had to do with a subject that the George Honeycutt and Hugh Royer brought up about the use of hand warmers for warming golf balls. Mm-hmm. And the question was, is it illegal to use hand warmers? And you clarified that for me before the show. If you would explain when it's legal and when it's not. Okay.
The rule is 14-3. That deals with artificial devices, so that would certainly be considered an artificial device. And generally they are not permitted. Obviously there are exceptions to that. Things like a glove would not be considered an artificial device. But coming specifically to the hand warmer, there are actually a couple of decisions specifically about that. 14-3/13 question is, a player uses a device to warm his hands during a round. Is the player in breach of Rule 14.3? And the answer is no. Although a hand warmer is an artificial device, its use to warm the hands is traditionally accepted, and exception 2 to Rule 14.3 applies. So that's perfectly fine, no problem with that. The other one was to do with warming the golf ball, and that's a little bit different. It is the next decision. The question is the use of a golf ball that was purposely warmed during a stipulated round with a golf ball warmer, wasn't aware there was such a thing, or a hand warmer or any such device, a breach of 14.3? And the answer is yes. That is a breach of 14.3. Use of a ball that is being purposely warmed during a stipulated round with an artificial device constitutes a breach of 14.3. However, it would not be a breach of 14.3 to use a ball that was artificially warmed prior to the stipulated round.
And I was producing the show where these guys were talking about that, and Hugh Royer had said that back in the days when he was on tour, they used to heat the balls up in the hotel room before they went to the course. Yeah. He said, and that's okay. But he made the comment that it's illegal to warm he said, if you got a hand warmer in your pocket that's got your balls in it, you're in breach of the rules. And they kind of argued back and forth. So I know where the listener was coming from with that question.
Yeah, he's right about that. I'm not sure how much of a difference it makes. I remember Gary Player used to be in the habit of keeping a second ball in his pocket and trading at every hole. I'm sure a lot of people do that. So it is a little warmer. It does make somewhat of a difference. I can't.
So it's legal to warm your balls if you do it before you get to the course, but if you do it during the round, that's illegal.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
We had another question that came across about the proper etiquette for putting out on the green. And I didn't realize it could be as complicated as it was until I brought that to your attention.
Yeah.
But if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Sure. That's covered by Rule 22, and that's a ball assisting or interfering with play. And, a lot of people kind of think you have the right under the rules to go ahead and hole out if you're playing continuous putting, I guess you would call that. That's not strictly true. I mean, Rule 10 covers the order of play, and in Rule 10 we have stroke play and match play, and it's the same for both rules, for both forms of play, rather. You have to play the ball farthest from the hole first.
Right.
And it's just strictly farthest from the hole. If, for example, one ball is in a bunker and another ball is on the putting green but further away, the person on the putting green is away.
In other words, everyone doesn't have to be on the green before the order starts.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Having said that, playing out of turn for pace of play purposes, etiquette purposes, where it makes sense, is a practice, in the words of the rule, which is not discouraged. The practice is playing out of turn in order to save time is not discouraged. So coming back to the holing out thing, it's partly a pace of play issue. I mean, if you knock it up to a foot or less, and then you want to mark it and all that kind of thing, that's obviously wasting time. So there's no reason not to hole it out, and it is covered by rule. The rule being that ball is potentially interfering with play. I'd certainly want somebody to get rid of a golf ball that's a foot away from the hole. I don't want to have the chance to hit it. So it would certainly be interfering with play potentially, and I would require him to mark it, and that's where the rule comes in, because he can then say, well, instead of marking it, I choose to play it.
Uh-huh.
So it then becomes that player's option to go ahead and hole out. So although it is playing out of turn, it's okay to do that. And of course, in match play, we have the concession thing too. So you can actually give that.
So what? So let's say my fellow competitor.
Mm-hmm. Very good.
I'm learning, Mark.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Not my playing partner, but my fellow competitor asked me not to mark it.
Ah. Yeah. Now that's a good one, because you can have a ball marked that may be interfering with your play, but you cannot ask somebody to not mark a ball that might assist you. If you're, for example, your ball's a foot away from the hole, it's at the side of the hole, my ball's off the green.
Right.
And I consider that ball might help me,
Yeah.
For backstop or get a deflection or something like that. And you go to mark it, and I say, hang on, Jeff, just go ahead and leave that there for me, would you? Now, and you agree to that, now we've both got a problem, because you've not marking it in order to potentially assist me.
Mm-hmm.
So you can always ask somebody to mark the ball, but you can't ask them not to. You have control of your golf ball. If you want to mark it,
that's an easy way to
you can
remember
mark it. You have control of your golf ball, so you can mark it if you want to. I can't ask you not to.
There was one more instance that we spoke about right before the show, too, about playing out of order to assist another player.
Exactly. Yeah. The order of play thing is more strictly regulated in match play. You have to play in order, and if you fail to play in the correct order in match play, your opponent may choose to recall the stroke. Mm-hmm. So if you tee up and it's not your honor, and you hit it down the middle of the fairway, I'm going to say, I'm sorry, Jeff, you played out of turn. I'm going to ask you to do that again. There's no penalty, but you have to
just to do
replay a shot. But it is my option. If you've hit that ball in the trees, I'm going to let it go, and you can continue to play from there. Yeah. But just coming back to the playing out of turn thing in stroke play, as I said, the USGA's wording is the practice is not discouraged, and the rule says there is no penalty for playing out of turn in stroke play unless the players agree to play out of turn in order to give one of them an advantage.
Yeah.
So the example I talked about before, let's say we're on the last green, you've got a putt to win the tournament from 20 feet,
Yep.
and I'm 10 feet away on the same line, and I've got no chance, and I say, go ahead and I'll go first, Jeff, that way you'll get a look at the line, and, because you got this putt for the tournament. Now we've agreed to play out of turn to give you the advantage.
Cool.
And then we are in breach of the rule there.
Well, thanks for clearing that up, because it's that there's a lot of consideration there. Now I want to hit you with something I didn't mention before the show. Sorry about that. I didn't prepare you.
Okay, catch me out here.
No, I just thought of this. Call me weird, but I've been getting up early the last couple of mornings watching the European Tour Championship,
right?
And specifically watching McIlroy. Got up to watch him tee off, and something happened on the par 5 number 7. And for you folks that are listening to this later on, I'm sorry for time stamping this, but it's a question that I think is valid. Back during the Ryder Cup, there was a lot of discussion on our programs about European playing tour players on the tour over there aren't as finicky as some of the American tours, that you see less lift, clean, and place happening over there as opposed to here. And back when we were comparing teams, we were talking about things like that.
Yeah.
Well, they're playing in Dubai
Yes.
in absolutely pristine conditions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, McIlroy hits his drive right down the middle of the fairway on the par 5. I believe it's number 7,
Mm-hmm.
and proceeds before his second shot to mark it, pick it up, and clean it and put it back.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting, I thought. I mean, it's not wet, it's not mud. Now they
They
said
were playing lift, clean, in place.
apparently.
Yeah.
Apparently. I mean, I can't imagine why they would in
Right.
those conditions. And the question came up, okay, when does that become acceptable? That seemed to me like an extreme situation because that course is absolutely pristine,
Right.
And I was blown away from the fact that he actually marked his ball, picked it up, and cleaned it and put it back. The commentator said, yeah, it's a big glob of mud on the ball.
Okay.
Uh,
Well, that really is kind of the key. We'll talk about local rules at some point, but the committee does have the authority to make a local rule for local abnormal conditions.
Right.
And when you're making that call, making that decision as a rules official or a committee, your main concern is it going to be unfair to the players not to have lift clean in place?
Right.
And basically that means, is the ball going to pick up some mud?
mhm.
And if that's the case, then it's legitimate.
Well, apparently
to
his
do
did. The
that.
interesting thing that happened after that was he promptly took his 3-wood and
saw
and
that.
hit it fat.
I did see
about
that.
100 yards.
I did see that, and the commentators did say that it was very wet and
Yeah.
maybe he lost his footing a little bit.
Yeah.
So,
So,
yeah,
anyway,
the lift clean in place thing is interesting too because there are certain tournaments. For example, the PAT, the playing ability test for
Yes.
for people who are aspiring to be golf professionals. They never play lift clean in place, no matter the conditions. They cannot do that because coming back to what we've been talking about over the past few weeks, the principles.
Mm-hmm.
The principle is you play the ball as it lies. And
Yep.
if you're playing lift clean in place, you're really not doing that, are you?
Yeah.
You're not playing as it lies. And up until fairly recently, in the last 10 years or so, the USGA absolutely did not recognize any tournament that was played using lift clean in place.
Mm-hmm.
However, in the meantime, they have come up with a local rule for lift clean in place to where it is acceptable to do it when the conditions are such. But you must follow the actual proper wording of the local rule, and it is in the back of the rules book. It's under Appendix 1 as local rules, and the specific wording is this: there's certain things you have to do. Number one, the committee has to determine where it's going to be lift clean in place. It's generally going to be in closely mown areas.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very rare that you would do it any other place. You must mark the position of the golf ball. You may then clean it and replace it within a specified area, and that's up to the committee to determine what that specified area is. Generally on tour, they'll say a club length.
Mm-hmm.
Now, to me, that seems like an awful lot.
That's pretty generous.
It really is generous
Yeah.
because, the purpose of the rule, as I said, is to clean the golf ball, not to give yourself a better lie.
Right.
We call it preferred lies, but the purpose is to clean the golf ball. So I think a club length is a lot. Generally, what I will do if I'm writing a local rule, I'm going to say a scorecard length,
Uh-huh.
because if you say something like 6 inches or a foot, who's carrying a ruler?
Yeah.
But everybody has a scorecard, so everybody's doing the same thing. So you place it within that specified area, no nearer the hole. You place it by hand. You can't roll it around with a golf club or anything like that. And you place it one time only. So you put it down, you take your hand off it, that golf ball is in play. If you then say, oh, wait a minute, there's a better spot just there,
Ah,
now you've moved the ball in play.
interesting.
So you do have to follow the procedure, the proper procedure, if you're going to be playing lift clean in place.
Yeah.
Which is the local rule, which, as I say, is fairly new.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. I guess now we can go to things that are unfair.
Okay. All right. That's Rule 24.
Uh-huh.
We covered 23 last time. And 24 is obstructions.
Mm-hmm.
And as we said with the definitions, that those are artificial things that are man-made or have been through a manufacturing process, that type of thing. And, of course, there are two kinds of obstruction. We have ones that you can move and ones that you cannot. Movable and immovable obstructions, of course. So 24.1, movable obstruction. A player may take relief without penalty from a movable obstruction as follows. If the ball does not lie in or on the obstruction may be moved. So you just move it out the way, like a rake or something like that. If the ball moves, it must be replaced, and there is no penalty. Now, that's in contrast to the one we were talking about last week, loose impediments.
Yeah.
If the ball moves during the movement of loose impediments, that is a penalty, but obstructions is not. So we simply replace it, provided that the movement of the ball is directly attributable to the removal of the obstruction. And we had that term come up last week too,
Yep.
directly attributable. Now, if the ball lies in or on the obstruction, the ball may be lifted and the obstruction removed. The ball must, through the green or in a hazard, be dropped or on the putting green placed as near as possible to the spot directly under the place where the ball lay in or on the obstruction, but not near the hole. The ball may be cleaned when lifted under this rule. Generally, with cleaning the ball, anytime you've got it in your hand, you can clean it with a couple of exceptions.
Mm-hmm.
One that we just talked about, Rule 22, the ball interfering with play.
Yeah.
Marking your ball on the green, of course, you're permitted to clean the ball if it's on the putting green. But if our balls are both off the green and your ball is in my way and I ask you to mark it, you are obliged to do that. That's one of those rules. You cannot clean that golf ball. So you need to be careful and just pick it up, finger and thumb, and don't grab a hold of it. Don't put it in your pocket.
And place it back.
And place it back.
Now, let's go back to the movable obstruction. Let's use the rake analogy again.
Mm-hmm.
And I've just hit my ball up next to the bunker.
Right.
It's not in the bunker.
Okay.
The rake's outside the bunker, and the ball's lying against the rake handle.
Yes.
I move the rake, and the ball rolls.
Right.
Okay. And do I place that ball or drop the ball?
You place it.
Okay.
You
If
place it at the position where it was. It's Rule 20.
But if it's on the rake, if it landed on the webbing of the rake or
Yes.
something, then I have to drop it.
Then you drop it.
Okay.
Yeah, if it's lying
Wow.
on it.
Okay.
And of course, if the ball won't remain at rest after you try and place it because the rake was keeping it
Right.
from rolling away, then you're going to, that's Rule 20 again, it's Rule 20-3D, you're going to find the nearest position, no nearer the hole, where it will remain at rest. So you'll just move it a few inches, or in some cases it might be a few feet until you find a spot where
Yeah.
the ball will remain at rest.
Cool.
So that's the movable obstruction. Now, when a ball is in motion, an obstruction that might influence the movement of the ball, other than the equipment of any player or the flag stick, when attended, removed, or held up, must not be moved. So you can't move an obstruction while the ball is in motion. So if you see, it's going to hit that rake, I'm going to quickly move it out of the way. You cannot do that, but you'll notice the exception there is the equipment of any player and the flag stick, whether it's attended, laid down, or taken out of the hole. You can move those while the ball is in motion. Those are the only exceptions to influence the movement.
Yeah.
of the
So
ball like that.
we're on the green. Player putts, misses, blows it by the hole, and it's
Right.
heading toward the flag stick that's laying down. It's okay to go pick that up.
Yes, it is.
I'd actually prefer
Yes,
it,
it
I
is.
guess. Yeah.
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 But not something other than the equipment of any player or the flag stick. So a rake or a soda can that's laying on the green or something like that.
Yeah.
You cannot move that.
Cool.
So that's the movable obstruction. So pretty straightforward. You're just going to move it out the way. Then we come to the immovable obstruction, and this is a little more complicated. So if it's movable, we'll move it out of the way. If we can't move the obstruction, we're going to move the ball instead. So an immovable obstruction, first of all, the first thing to do is establish interference. Interference means that the obstruction is interfering with the lie of the ball. In other words, maybe it's sitting on a cart path.
Mm-hmm.
The stance of the player, so you're standing on a cart path to hit a ball that's off the cart path, or the area of intended swing.
Okay.
So if it's just off the cart path by a couple of inches, so it's not touching it, you're not standing on it, but you're going to hit it when you make a stroke,
Right.
that's interference also. Notice that line of sight or line of play or any of those things, those are not That does not constitute interference.
Okay.
So you don't get relief for that. I think you brought that up a couple of weeks ago when you
Right.
were talking about your irrigation control
Yes.
box.
Yes.
So that's the first thing to establish the interference. Once interference has been established, now we have to take relief, or not we have to, we may take relief.
Mm-hmm.
You can choose to play the ball if you wish, but you are entitled to relief. And the way we do that is we're getting into this nearest point of relief, which is something which is very misunderstood by players. So except when the ball's in a water hazard or a lateral water, so you're going to get relief for an obstruction in a water hazard. A movable obstruction, yes. You can move movable obstructions in a water hazard, but you don't get relief from an immovable obstruction in a water hazard. So the relief is this. Through the green being the whole area of the course except hazards, putting green, teeing ground, and a hole being played. If the ball lies through the green, the player must lift the ball and drop it without penalty within 1 club length of, and not nearer the hole than, the nearest point of relief. Italicized definition. So we'll come to what that means. The nearest point of relief must not be in a hazard or on a putting green. When the ball is dropped within 1 club length of the nearest point of relief, the ball must first strike a part of the course at the spot that avoids interference by the immovable obstruction that is not in a hazard or on the putting green. So we're going to drop it within, not at a club length, but anywhere within the club length. It doesn't have to be the full club length. And when it says club length, it can be any club in your bag. Doesn't matter. You can use your driver. In measuring, you can use any club. We do have and this is part of this rule, using the club you would have used to determine the nearest point of relief. Now, if you're in a bunker, it's also a hazard, but unlike a water hazard, you do get relief from an obstruction, an immovable obstruction in the bunker. So, again, it's the same thing. You've got to drop it within a club length of the nearest point of relief, but of course you do have to stay in the bunker, or you may choose to drop outside of the bunker, keeping the point where the ball lay between you and the hole, and go back as far as you want, but that's going to cost you a stroke. You're not getting out of the bunker for free. So you may choose to do that instead.
But that's a penalty. Now, give me
Yeah.
an example of an immovable obstruction that might be in a bunker.
Steps
Oh, okay.
leading down
Yeah.
into the bunker,
All right.
they might be obstructions. Or maybe a drain cover, or something that you do encounter from time to time too, is the liners that they use underneath the bunker. Sometimes they'll kind of peek through the sand.
Yep.
You know what I'm talking about? Like
Yep,
the
yep, I sure do.
nylon
Yep.
cover or something like that. That's obstruction.
Okay.
It's artificial and it's immovable. Makes it an obstruction. So those are some examples of that. On the putting green, now I said there is no relief for the line of play or the line of sight. It's only for stance lie, the ball area of intended swing. Except on the putting green, you do also have interference from an obstruction on the line of putt. The line of putt meaning a stroke made from the putting green. If you're off the green and putting it, that's not the line of putt.
Right.
It's the line of play. So you might have an obstruction on your line of putt. For example, we play at World Tour with the Golf Academy. We play there on a regular basis. They've got a couple of huge greens out there. I don't know if you play out there very much. Yeah,
Yeah, I love
that
that
very
course.
first hole, the St Andrews hole. That's a monster green. It's
Huge
so
green,
big, they have a sprinkler head in the middle of it.
Yep.
Because the ones from the side are not going to reach it. So that will be an obstruction on the putting green. So if that is in your line of putt,
Yeah.
you would place it at the nearest point of relief.
And listening to you say that, you use the term line of play versus line of putt.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Right. Line of putt means a stroke made from the putting green, regardless of what club you're using.
Yeah.
You don't have to use a putter on the putting green, of course.
Right.
You could use another club. Frowned upon by the greenkeepers, I'm sure, but perfectly. And obviously, you can putt from off the green. It's where the ball is lying that determines whether it's line of putt or line of play.
Yeah.
So those are that's the immovable obstruction. Now, there's a couple of exceptions and a couple of notes, and as I always tell you, read the rule to the end, because you may think you found it, but, oh, wait a minute, there's an exception here, and there are a couple of exceptions. A player may not take relief under this rule if the interference by anything other than the immovable obstruction makes the stroke clearly impractical. In other words, you may be standing on a cart path, which entitles you relief, but your ball's down in the roots of a tree. There's no way you can get a club on it. So you're not going to get relief from that. You're not going to get relief from that because something other than the obstructions
Wow.
causing you not to be able to play. And the other exception is interference by an immovable obstruction would occur only through the use of a clearly unreasonable stroke or an unnecessarily abnormal stance, swing, or direction of play. So your ball may be off the cart path, and to play a normal shot, you wouldn't be standing on it, but you say, well, if I were to go play sideways or play left-handed or take a longer club, I would be on the cart path. You're not going to be able to do that. So you've just got to imagine the cart path is not there and just ask yourself honestly, what would I be doing if the obstruction weren't here?
Right.
To determine. So you can't just manufacture the interference.
Yeah, you can't create an interference.
That's exactly right. Now, a couple of notes. Note 1, if a ball is in a water hazard, the player may not take relief, as I said, so there's no relief in a water hazard. And note 2, if the ball to be dropped to a place under this rule is not immediately recoverable, another ball may be substituted. Again, that refers to one of our great principles. We play the same ball that we teed off with, unless the rule allows you to substitute it. In this case, it does. If you drop and it rolls into the hazard or something like that, if it's not immediately recoverable, you can substitute it. And then the third note is a local rule. The committee may make a local rule stating that the player must determine the nearest point of relief without crossing over, through, or under an obstruction. You may have something like some netting, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
And if you measure through it, you get to the other side and have a clear shot. If there's a local rule preventing you from doing that, then you would not. So that's 24.2. Then we come to 24.3. And this is one that I'm sure a lot of people don't realize. If you lose your ball in an obstruction, there are very, very few circumstances where you are not going to have to take a stroke and distance penalty if you cannot find your golf ball. There's not many situations. It's rule 24, 25, 26, and 18.1. Those are the only rules where you're not taking stroke and distance. So if you lose your ball in an obstruction, you don't have to take stroke and distance. Now, it says here, it's 24.3, it says, it is a question of fact whether a ball that has not been found, having been struck towards an obstruction, is in the obstruction. In order to apply this rule, it must be known or virtually certain, that's a term we keep coming across as well, known or virtually certain that the ball is in the obstruction. In the absence of such knowledge or certainty, the player must proceed under Rule 27, stroke and distance. But if we know it's in there, I mean, an obstruction, we're talking about carpaths, it can be anything artificial. It might be a building of some kind. This famously happened, Tiger Woods at Phoenix, Firestone, I think it was actually, where he hit the ball on the roof of the clubhouse a few years ago. Do you remember that one?
I remember that now, yeah.
He hit it on the roof of the clubhouse. We knew where it was, but we couldn't locate it.
Yeah.
They couldn't locate it, so it was lost in an obstruction. So he didn't have to take stroke and distance. He was able to proceed under this rule, which is no penalty. So if it's known or virtually certain that we have that situation, where are we? It must be known or virtually certain to proceed under this rule. So if it's known or virtually certain the ball has not been found, is in the movable obstruction, the player may substitute another ball and take relief without penalty under this rule. If he elects to do so, he must remove the obstruction. This is in a movable obstruction. Mm-hmm. He must remove the obstruction through the green or drop a ball or on the putting green. Place the ball under the spot directly under the place where the ball last crossed the outermost limit of the movable obstruction, not near the hole. That's the movable obstruction, like a vehicle perhaps, something like that, golf cart.
Now, let me ask you this: the temporary stands that are put around the
Yes.
holes. The player approaching a hole hits it into the stands.
Yes.
What's the rule?
They are immovable obstructions, but they have a special status. They are actually called TIOs, temporary immovable obstructions. And this is only by local rule. And it's for things like grandstands, TV towers,
Right.
concession stands, leaderboards, those types of things. And in that case, and again, let me stress, this is only by local rule, we do have that line of sight relief. Generally, things like maintenance buildings, rain shelters, that kind of thing, the committee is smart enough to keep them out of the regular area
Right.
of play, but sometimes in a tournament like that, you're going to have things that really do affect normal play, and that's the reason they have line of sight relief. Line of sight means just that. If you cannot see the flagstick, not where you want to hit it or not the direction you want the ball to take, but the line of sight to the flagstick. If you find the point where you can see it around the side of the obstruction and then take a club length, that becomes your nearest point of relief, and then we're back to the regular
Right.
nearest point of relief. Nearest point of relief thing there. That's temporary immovable obstructions. So coming back to not finding the ball in an obstruction, as I said, we need to know for sure that it's in there, or virtually certain that it's in there. And then, of course, we come to the relief, because our relief, as we said, is the nearest point of relief, which is the position where the ball would need to be to get away from that. But we don't know where the ball is, so we can't establish a nearest point of relief. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to take the only point that we have that we can know with some degree of certainty, and that is the point where the ball last crossed the outermost
Right.
limit of the condition, and the ball is deemed to lie at that place, and we can proceed on from there, taking our club length. So that's that. Now, we kind of skipped over this nearest point of relief thing, so you want to quickly talk about that?
Let's go ahead. Let's go ahead and
Okay.
cover it since we're there.
That again is something that's abused, I guess, by players, not on purpose, I'm sure. I always tell my students NPR. It stands for nearest point of relief, not nicest point of relief.
Got it.
Sometimes you're going to be worse off. Sometimes you're going to be better off. You've simply got to imagine that the obstruction wasn't there in order to determine that nearest point of relief. So if the ball's slap bang in the center of a cart path, or even, let's say, just on the fairway side of the center of the cart path, it's not necessarily going to be the nearest point of relief. Is not necessarily going to be in the fairway. It might be on the other side.
Right.
And again, it's going to be different if you're right or left-handed. So sometimes even you may not even be able to determine the nearest point of relief because it might be in the middle of a tree. So the nearest point of relief is the point where you have complete relief from that position. It's not just the lie of the ball, it's the stance as well. And that's where we come to, in order to determine the nearest point of relief, we do need to figure out what club we would have used had the cart path, we'll keep using the example of the cart path,
Right.
not been there. So if you're very close to the green, 20, 30 yards from the green, and you say, well, I was going to hit my 3-wood here, that's clearly not reasonable
Yeah.
to do that.
Good stuff, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just wanted to close real quick with something I was just we keep talking about Tufts, something that I reread just recently with Tufts about things unfair and so forth. And he tells a little story about a golfer who comes to him and he said, I've got a problem with this guy that I was playing with. I'm not sure he was really actually breaching a rule, but he was just unpleasant to play with, and he was moving around and distracting me. And he said, I looked through the book, I couldn't find anything in the book. Is there a rule I can get him on with that? And Mr. Tufts said, yeah, that'd be Rule 35. So the He says, go look it up. So the guy goes and thumbs through his rule book and realizes there's only 34 rules in the book. So he goes back to Mr. Tufts and says, Mr. Tufts, there's only 34 rules. He said, no, there is a rule 35. He said, well, where is it? He said, it's one of the unwritten rules. He says, well, what does it say? He says, never play golf with scoundrels.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That's an unwritten rule.
Yeah,
A good one.
I've made the choice to not play with scoundrels after I've learned they were scoundrels.
Yeah, and those scoundrels often have a hard time arranging matches. So.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, cool.
Okay, so TGD, radio and TV, are produced and broadcast by Zeus Radio Network for thegolfdirector.com. When visiting the Golf Director, navigate over to our featured golf courses page where you'll find up-to-date information about course conditions, specials, and much more. If you need help with your next golf vacation, give us a call, 844-GO-GOLF-1, 844-GO-GOLF-1. All of our TGD programming is archived for listening and viewing on demand. It's also on YouTube now as well. To catch up on a show you may have missed, click on the TGD Radio or TGD TV tabs in the menu at golfdirector.com. This is Martin Woodhouse. On behalf of all of us here at the Golf Director, we thank you for tuning in. There's more TGD golf news and information coming up next. Stay tuned.